All right, first photo from Texas. We got this American Coot in front of the sun. Just waited for him to swim right through, lined him up nicely. All right, let's go with the crop. I think I'm fairly straight there. Barely off. All right, so drop the highlights. I want to get that sun nice and orange. I'm going to lift the exposure, lift the shadows, which gives me more out here. So it's less of that sort of heavy vignette. And then I'll drop the blacks. And then next I'm going to do... Watch this. Let's try a radial that sort of fits this sunspot there like that, but then we'll subtract off a linear off the top there, right there, so it's just kind of that bottom half. All right, I'm just going to lift the exposure, the highlights. Let's zoom in on this here and watch what happens with these highlights. I want to get them bright, but not overexposed, so something like that. And I'll just drop the blacks for contrast. Maybe a little bit more with the exposure. Drop the blacks for contrast. So watch. Let's see what that does. Oh, yeah. See how much more? Look, that was before, after. Look how much more that bird stands out. Way, way, way better. All right. A little bit of a crop. I'm just going to take that one dark edge off the left there. Into Photoshop. This might just be one of those, like, take it into Photoshop to save it into my proper format modes. But let's try lightening that silhouette up just a little bit more. So we'll do curves. Wrong one. Lift it up just a little bit there. Invert. Grab our paintbrush. We're going to paint with white on the mask here. Whoa. Let's go a little bit lighter there. I think my tablet pen is not doing pressure sensitivity. Every so often that happens. And so what I have to do is, like, there's a kind of a plastic tip that sticks in the end of it. And so I just have to take that out and then put it back in. There we go. Now I'm getting the lower opacity that I'm looking for. And I'm basically just looking to kind of brighten up sort of just mainly around the bird here. I'm painting right over top of the bird because he's black. It's not really going to make much of a difference there. But watch this. Before, after. See that? Just brighten those areas a little bit. I'm going to paint with black down here to get rid of it. The sun's a little bit overexposed there. So let's put a blank layer in there. Grab the clone tool. And then we'll just kind of fill in those really bright spots with some of that slightly darker yellow. There we go. Let's make the sky pop a little bit more. Watch this. Curves. Just kind of punch it up like that. Drop down that black point there on the curve. Invert. Big soft brush. Painting with white. Just going to paint in light opacity, harder on the edges, so it gets more effect over there. Yeah, that's much nicer. I like that a lot more. Before, after. See how it just kind of brings the whole thing up a little bit? Maybe that's a little too much, so I'll just back off the opacity on that because I do still want to keep attention in there. And I think that's going to do it. That's pretty much it. So we'll save that and check the original compared to it. I think what we're going to see is just the addition of the brightening and lightening up the highlights and stuff like that, even when we did it on the raw file, is going to really just help make the silhouetted bird stand out. I think before it was just kind of dark and dull in there. So let's see. We'll go here, reset that raw file. Yeah. And it's like, because the sun was coming through the trees, the reflection wasn't like fully strong. So look at that. That was before, after. It just stands out way more there. Much nicer photo, but a subtle edit. All right, number one is done. Let's go on to the next few. All right, on to this next silhouette of a coot again. I already straightened out the crop and did a little bit of playing around with it. Let's go just a little bit warmer here. And again, like, what else do I do to this? There's really nothing to do. Let's just pop the saturation a little bit. Just get it nice and vivid. I'm just going to open this into Photoshop and convert it. I don't think there's anything that I really want to do in here. The bird's standing out nicely. It's kind of brighter down here, brighter up top. So yeah, I'm just going to... Apparently I'm not going to save it. Let's see. Maybe if I just do like one little change to it, it'll let me save it. There we go. Okay. All right. And let's check out the original roll on that. Let's fully reset it. So there we go. Just minor color shift, little saturation bump. That's it. And then straightening. There you go. Nice easy edit. So we go from that to that. There's the final image. That is, I think that's officially the fastest edit I've ever done on this on these lessons. I'm so used to doing different shows. All right, guys, on to the next one. Okay, so here's the original on this buffle head. So number one, I don't think it, I mean, it looks really straight to me. I don't think I have to straighten it. I don't know how I pulled that off. I'm going to crop in a little bit more. There's just a lot of weird space, and the splashes are important to me. And so normally I would almost never put the bird flying out of the frame. So like further on the right side because he's facing right. But in this case, because the splashes are so important, I kind of like that story of it like just blasting out of the frame like that. So there's the crop. We're just going to look how much blue is in the wings and the head there. So we're just going to warm this up like crazy to kind of get rid of that, which gives us that nice golden look. I'll throw in a little magenta, a little bit more warming. Let's lift the shadows and see what happens. There we go. Okay, that's good on the bird, but not the background. I don't like what it did to the background. So let's do blacks down globally for contrast. We'll do a subject select, which should hopefully get me just that bird, maybe a little bit of the splashes. That's fine. You know what? Let's ditch the splashes. Subtract a linear. We'll just take off that whole left side there. All right, and we're going to do little exposure lift, shadow lift, black drop, a little bit more shadow lift, a little bit warmer because I don't want those blues to get real saturated is the word I was looking for. So there we go. So watch this. Before, after. Show us that bird so much more, which is really cool. And then maybe let's just do a big radial all around here and just try a little like maybe texture. Yeah, look at that. Before, after. See what it does to those water drops? Look at that. Just pops them. Awesome. That's what I wanted. Right there. All right. This is looking good. Into Photoshop we go. Again, not much to do here in Photoshop. This is pretty cool, though. So I'm going to make a new blank layer to begin with. Actually, I'm going to undo that. There's nothing to clone, really, on this. The bird looks really, really good. Let's see, maybe we can make his feet stand out better. So curves, lift it up, contrast it, add a little bit more red. Invert, small brush, just paint some of that in there. Yeah, look at that. Oh, way too much on the red. We're going to have to tone that down. Sheesh. Went absolutely neon with that. So let's get rid of the red. So before, after, there we go. Just that little bit of pop on the foot, before, after. It's subtle. Let's just darken down that a little bit more as well. So another curves adjustment layer, darken it down, invert it, big soft brush, maybe 20% opacity. And you're just going to keep kind of just building up, just paint a little bit across there. And then maybe just a little bit across the top, a little bit across the bottom, just gives us a little bit more color there. And I do think we're done. Before, after. There we go. All right, we're going to see a nice difference on this one. Whenever we shift the white balance that far off the original, you usually do get a pretty good, obvious difference between the before and the after. But it's more just a proper white balance setting, That's really what we're trying to do there. So there we go. Before on the right, after on the left, much better looking, like huge difference there. Love the splash and seeing the two previous, or three, I guess. I don't know what that hit was. Footprints in the water. Super cool. All right. Let's see. What do we got next? Time for some of these least grebes. All right. Let's play with this grebe. First things first, straighten it out. Definitely shot that a bit crooked. And then I'm going to go vertical here. And I want to center it right up. Go right down the middle on that because it is a head-on shot like that, and it's not perfect. He's kind of angled a little bit towards the left there, but it's pretty close, and I just really like how the eyes are sort of really standing out. And that's what I want to make this edit a little bit more about that. So watch, I'm going to go a little bit lower here with the whole thing, and then we'll pop the highlights and maybe the whites a little bit. And then let's try, what are we going to do here? Let's do a background select. And I think let's try this. Let's do negative dehaze to soften it up, but then we'll saturate it to keep the color. And we'll just maybe darken the blacks a little, should richen it up. So let's see what that does for it. Yeah, just a little flattening out of that. So there's slightly less texture back there. I kind of dig that. All right, then I'm going to do a subject select, intersect, radial for that head and the eyes there. And so for this, I want to brighten, really pop those highlights, really pop those whites, and keep the blacks nice and rich. Another subject select. Then I'll subtract out a linear off the top half here, so I can just darken the whole bottom half of the bird, basically. Like that and that, the highlights down, right? So something like that. So let's see what all that masking did for me. So before, after. See how it just brings attention before, after, into those crazy eyes. Crazy-eyed bird. All right. I'm going to hop over into Photoshop, and I don't know what more. You know, I'll do a little bit more dodging and burning. So drop some curves on there. Invert. A little bit across the top. A little bit across the bottom there. A little bit right in there. Let's see if we can get that blue selected and just enhance it. So we'll go back to the background. We're going to go select, color range. I'm going to grab right in here in that section. Lower this fuzziness so it's just sort of that blue area. There we go, that's good. Let's do a curves adjustment layer. We'll go to the blue channel, lift it up a little bit, and then we'll go to the red channel, drop it down a little bit, get some cyan going there. So right before, after, a little too much, so we'll drop the opacity a little bit. Then I'm going to option click or alt click on Windows so I can view just the mask and then paint with black just to get rid of any little area that's maybe going to taint the bird. And these bottom corners like that. Let's make sure there's nothing up top. Yeah, there we go. We're good. All right, so that clean that out. And then, I don't know, what do you think, guys? Can we, I don't want to lighten the eyes, but instead I'm going to just dull down the head around it. So watch this. We're going to just basically, I made a darkened curve layer there. Inverted it so it's not affected anywhere. We're going to grab the brush and paint with white all around here in these areas, just to sort of darken them up a little bit more. Keep this guy nice and moody. Now I'm going to go smaller and paint with black to get rid of the halo. Look at that. Right here. See how I actually painted over into the background a little bit? I do not want to do that at all. And then I'll go even smaller and just completely remove everything off the eyes, which should bring them back to their original brightness. And it should have the net effect of doing that. All right, so a little too much. So again, we just lower the opacity there, and now here's our before, after. Subtle, brings attention into those eyes, just makes them really pop a little bit more. I'm really happy with that. That's fun. Crazy colored eyes on that bird. All right, so main difference here when I reset this is going to be the horizontal crop and just being a little bit lighter. So that's our big difference between our before and after, and that's our final image. All right, we got a couple more of this fun bird to do. Okay, let's see. Just a little bit of cropping here. I'm just going to come in a tiny bit tighter. I don't like all this light water at the bottom. I do want to keep everything at the top there. Let's see. We'll kind of come across that water line. Something like that seems a little bit straighter. Maybe even a little bit more. There we go. Warm up the whole thing just a little bit. Let's get that golden color looking good in there. A little bit more green. Maybe not that much. Lift up those shadows, drop the blacks to get the contrast. Let's throw a linear on the bottom and warm and green that up a little bit more, so that should help kind of ease out. Yeah, there we go. Just a little bit more green. That bluish color but down there. So watch. Before, after. See that? Much nicer. Much nicer. I think the rest is just going to happen in Photoshop, so let's get to it. There we go. First step, there's nothing to clone here, so let's just get right into some curves. I'm just going to try and lighten those dark spots on the top left there, like that. So light opacity, just paint with white, and then there's another one over here, sort of. There we go. Now let's kind of punch up the bird's head a little bit. So lighten, keep that contrast, something like that. Invert, zoom in, paint with white. Oh yeah, look at that. Really popping his head out. Maybe a little bit in there and there, not there. And we'll let the head be where it is. Maybe a little across the bottom of the bill there too. Yeah, look at that. Just really makes it sort of stand out there. Oh, what a stunning bird. And then I think on this one, I'm actually going to do another curves adjustment layer and try and contrast up the background a little bit. Instead of going the other way to like dull it out, this bird is standing out quite nicely here. I want to sort of contrast this to A, make the colors a little bit richer, but B, sort of enhance that neat texture that's happening back there. So there we go. That's it right there. Before, after, subtle editing. I think it did a good job. Let's do a little tiny burn across the bottom. Invert that. There we go. That looks good. Let's save it. We'll check out that before and after. I think on this one, basically all we did was just a little color punch overall, a little contrast, and then just some dodging on the head to make the viewer's attention go to the head a little bit more. It was already kind of lit that way because I waited for him to turn in, and you know, I culled it down and picked the one where he did that the most, where he was like turned in looking right at it, but you'll see. So yeah, definitely dull. The color isn't quite as popping. Look at that. Like, this one definitely has some dullness to it. The colors aren't there, but proper white balance, a little bit of punch. It doesn't feel oversaturated to me, and I'm really happy with that one. It's a beautiful portrait of this bird. Now this one, I want to go a little bit of a different direction here than the last one we just did. So I'm just going to do some straightening there. A little bit off the right side. Not much. There we go. I definitely want to lean into this warmer tone top, cooler tone bottom. So let's adjust the whole image for like basically the top and the bird. So warm it up, give a little bit more of that golden light on the bird, lift the shadows, drop those blacks, get that contrast. There we go. Now let's put the linear on the bottom, and we're just going to cool it off with the white balance. Takes it back towards that cooler blue color, which is neat. I think it's like a good split there, and the blues are already kind of popping quite nicely there. But let's just give that whole bottom just a see what happens with the saturation there. We'll give it a little shot of that. All right, I think we can do more in Photoshop because basically there's not a ton of color down there. So that's why I think we're not getting as much blue here as we do have right there. But in here, Photoshop, we can just go to curves, remove some red, go to the blue, lift that up a bunch, and look how much more blue we can make that. So we'll paint that in. We inverted it, and then we're just going to go paint it in into these spots where we want that blue to show a little bit more. It's a little too cyan, so I'll go to the red channel and move that point back up and to the left. And to the blue channel, I'll move that up one more. So before, after, yeah, that cleans that up nicely. Or not cleans it up, but gives me the blue I want. And then just the same as before, we'll just do one more curves, brighten it up, drop the contrast there, paint that in on just the head. So again, it's a Command I or Control I on Windows to invert that mask so it's not affecting anything. And then we just paint it in where we want. A little bit of contrast overall on the bird isn't going to hurt anything either. And I think we're done. Before, after. Look at that. Subtle. As always, like, these images are pretty clean. We got nice distant backgrounds, solid light. You know, 15 minutes to a half hour earlier, the light would have been even better. But this is when the bird came out. It's still got some good quality to it. So let me go ahead and reset that. Yeah, again, look at the dullness there. And then we just kind of give it that nice punch. So we go from that, where everything feels a little flat, to there, which always makes sense. That's what raw files are. They're set up to be flat so that I can take it whatever direction I want. In this case, in this direction, it works out quite nicely. What do we got? One more. That's it. This one's going to be an interesting edit, and I chose it for a reason. So what happened on this one, number one, I think it's pretty level here, is that I was shooting through a lot of grass. You may have been able to see that in the behind the scenes shoot, but I'm not sure because I wasn't really moving the wide angle camera around that much. But I was shooting through a lot of grass. That's why everything's sort of got a haze to it here. So I'm going to counteract that just a little with dehaze globally here. So we'll just punch that up just a little. That helps. I just want to get it a little bit more contrast back here. But I don't want to go crazy because I got to say the light was getting strong at this point. Where I do want to get that contrast back is just on the bird. So let's do a subject select. And now we'll really hit it with the dehaze. And because dehaze tends to always darken things, we'll lighten it up a little bit. And watch this. Before, after. It also went cool, so let's warm it a little. Keep that white balance properly. Maybe even saturate a touch. Before, after. Before, after. See how, like, watch. I'll zoom in on this bird. Before, see how flat it is. After, gives me that contrast, that pop. And now that bird stands out a little bit. I will say, I think globally we can just use some saturation as well. Because, again, I was shooting through that foreground. There we go. That's mostly it. Let's take this into Photoshop. We'll do a little bit of burning in the background here. I don't want to do too much, though, around the bird's head there because it's a black bird on a lighter background. So I don't want to make that background too much darker, but something like that I think looks good in some areas across the top here. So that was a curves adjustment layer. And then we're just going to paint that in. We'll leave this area right around here, kind of the lightest, and then just darken all that stuff. Let's see if we can get a little bit more out of his head. His plumage is pretty white, kind of wacky there. Looks like maybe a first-year bird coming into some breeding plumage, but who knows. All right, so that's the curve I went with. Lighten the highlights a little bit more. Keep the blacks down. It should just sort of pop some of this stuff in there. Maybe even these whites along there. Some of these feathers. Those whites are doing quite well already. So I'll paint them out. I went too bright with them. And then I think we're done. Yeah, there we go. Before, after, definitely improved. I certainly like darkening that top area a little bit. That was just too bright, and for me, really calling attention back there. So now that we have that darkened down, I'll just wait a second here until it saves. We'll check the before and after, and then we'll take a look at all the final 7 images on this one. Yeah, that's definitely an improvement, especially once I reset this and it loses that contrast. Look at the difference there in the contrast and vividness of it. So before, after. There we go. It pops a lot more. Looks really good. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 images. That's what we got right there. Nice little variety. These are pretty similar, but the color tones kind of work differently. And then obviously we got our fun head-on shot there. And yeah, I'm happy with this set. Got some creative stuff in the beginning here. These are all much more standard portraits, but species I've never seen. I'm really happy with them because they're really nice, clean portraits. So next time, hopefully I can get something like this of that bird.